Russian Styles coming up at welterweight, an absolute banger. It's overused, but new Mansa is taking on the great white Alex Morono. Alex Morono's last time out, a submission win over a resurgent old Tim Means. I mean, he got beat in the first round.
He's like Mark Henry. I got an awful lot left in the tank.
Got hit to the body, did Alex Morono in that first round, ultimately losing it. He's on his way to losing the second round, and all of a sudden, when it gets in tight, he's able to pull guillotine, regrip, and he ends up getting that submission win. And Morono is one of those really interesting fighters. He's been in the UFC since Jesus was a cowboy, as a lot of older folks like to say in rural parts of this country. But when you do look at this one, they usually say when Christ...
with Stuart Duffy lately?
They usually say when Christ was a cowboy, but I went and dropped the J. So when you look at this matchup, though, Joaquin Buckley, I mean, what works well for him? Well, man. I'm glad that you asked. Big hooks. He closed the distance with those. Big head kicks. We think of the Dikirko fight.
Very powerful fight.
And so on and so forth. But I went back and did a little bit of calculation for this one, Matt. I went and got myself a business degree, and I thought, let's dust it off and add stuff up on the internet.
Joaquin Buckley.
Matt, Joaquin Buckley, 356 significant strikes he's been able to land in his time in the UFC.
Look at that.
He's 6-4 in the UFC, so that's a lot of significant strikes. 34% of them, aka 122, have been body shots. It's an unheralded portion of Joaquin Buckley's game. You think back to his fight against Chris Curtis, he landed a great effect. Even his fight against Kevin Holland, where he got dropped twice and he lost that fight. It was a lot of body shots. Joaquin Buckley, being a tricky sidewinding southpaw, lands a lot to the body. The other thing that Joaquin Buckley does that you might not like, and it lends itself to a 6-4 UFC record. Yes, there's highlights. Yes, there's nah. But when you look at it for Buckley, he whiffs on a lot of power shots. That's not good for your energy systems. Typically, a well-conditioned person's not going to do that. But again, 6-4, so it's not all that bad. The knockdown ratio, 7-4. 7-4 to 4 against for Joaquin Buckley in the UFC. But again, 22% significant strike accuracy. And I don't bring these numbers up every single weekend for as many fights as I have this week. But I think it does paint a picture for a guy like Buckley. It's an aim big, miss big approach.
It is.
And he's got a lot of Michael Chandler to his game.
He definitely does. Now, I think that might work against a guy like Alex Morono, but it could lead to his downfall too, because Morono showed that part of his submission repertoire his last time out against Tim Means, because normally when you thought about Morono, you thought about his volume striking, his ability to throw in combination.
I mean, I think of Alex Morono every single time I break down his fights. Worry. He's like Anthony Pettis, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Taekwondo black belt. I marry those two together.
As Shrek famously said, ogres are like onions. We got layers, and Alex Morono has layers to his game. But again, you do often forget about some parts of his game because he is so well-rounded and he has such a complete MMA skill set. But the thing is, when you're so complete, it doesn't mean that you excel at necessarily everything, right? And for Morono, against heavy hitters, they can close the distance and land power shots, because a lot of what Morono does well on the feet comes down to his ability to throw with tremendous volume. His own accuracy, I'd say it's pretty good. It's not crazy by any means, but when he's able to go downhill, mix in his own body shots with his own combinations to the head, Morono can have a lot of success, but he is willing to stand in the pocket for the extra second, half second too long, and that's when his opponents can start to land counter shots, even in fights when he wins. Like, remember the Reese McKee fight? That was a wild matchup, and yes, Morono won the fight, but he was getting tagged by some big counter shots from McKee because he was willing to stand in the pocket for a little bit too long, and I agree with you in how you open. I think this could be an absolutely incredible fight. It should be a really fan-friendly matchup, but if Morono does fight this fight with the style of, hey, I'm gonna go out there, try to roll downhill with my combinations and have success and make Joaquin Buckley uncomfortable, because all those highlights that we see from Joaquin Buckley, they're not only when he's mixing his strikes to the body and the head, it's when he's moving forward, because he does do a really good job of moving his feet from the long range to close range. He will throw kicks, but normally he's really kind of planting his feet on the outside, setting those kicks up. But when he rushes from point A to point B, there's not a lot you can do to really halt that forward momentum if you're not a high level striker like Kevin Holland was, because those counter shots down the middle were beautiful, or a really high level wrestler who can test some of his takedown defense and avoid him from just moving forward. But for Morono, I just don't know if he excels in any one area enough to really test those parts of Buckley's game, because I think Buckley's going to be the bigger guy at welterweight too, especially in this matchup.
I mean, if you do consider it for a guy like Alex Morono, we reference a book here in studio quite often. It's The Boxing List by Bert Sugar and Teddy Atlas. It's in the corner, sometimes usually behind us, but Teddy Atlas is always saying, don't be there for the receipt. And Alex Morono is one of those fighters that moves well in every direction. In every direction. He can strike well off the back foot, side to side, and moving forward, but sometimes he'll just hold on for
stand
that
there,
second too long, and he does get hit. So when you look at this matchup, Matt, once we get to the top of this card, the odds start to sway a little bit. Buckley is a pretty big favorite in the fight. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprised us there to you. Buckley's 3-2 and is 5 on in. Alex Morono is 4-1. I'm gonna say over under 72.5% Buckley.
I think it's gonna be over. I do think he'll be heavily favored.
And it's under 1,055 total votes. 69% Buckley, 81% by knockout for the 31% that are Morono, 72% by decision. And Joaquin Buckley is no slouch when it comes to the wrestling, but Alex Morono, once it does get down to the mat, he can get tricky. Think of the fight even against Matt Semmelsberger, third round, flying knee. Lands against Morono, we're down to the mat, and then all of a sudden, Morono's able to flip the switch. So, for me, I do like Buckley with the blitzes in this one, but aim big, miss big against a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of fighter in the Great White. It could be a recipe of success for the underdog in this one.
Oh, I can't disagree with that whatsoever. And again, Morono, when you have a guy who is so well-rounded, who has a good gas tank, who can throw a high level of volume, you can never really count him out in the underdog spot. But the issue is, we have seen him get tagged by big punches in the past. And Joaquin Buckley is one of those big punchers. Again, he was one of those weird fighters, so I know he lost in a pretty bad fashion to Kevin Holland in his debut, but for some reason I thought, hey, this guy could be pretty good. He moves really well on the feet. I like his ability to close the distance, and I think that ability to close the distance is going to be the big X factor in this fight, and that's why I also have Buckley.
Both of us going with new Mansa, Joaquin Buckley to get the win in the fight. Do you have the Great White Morono? Do you have Buckley? Let us know down below in the comments section. It is time for the co-main event of the evening. Abdul Alhassan looking to put that Judo Thunder to work. He's going to be taking on B. Joe Pyfer. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.